Welcome to Drinks Coach. It's an auspicious occasion. This is episode 150. Yes, I made it to 150 before 2 years is up. I think that's pretty good. If you can hear anything in the background, it's the unbelievable howling gale that's on today. By the time you guys watched it, you would have read about it in the press. I think some people are going, oh, what gale? I went out this morning, drove past Gordon Ramsay's house, no less, and there was a 150-foot tree in the middle of the road, straight through his neighbour's front building. The whole thing was just caved in. So I decided to drive around, for those people who know the area, past the Manuel School. But there's another tree crossing the entire Windmill Road, so I'm basically blocked in for a few days. So what's the theme today? Well, these are nice themes, I think. I think a lot of people who contact me about my shows ask me to do a few more of these, which is kind of like a stream of consciousness, what's in the rack, Joe, kind of thing. And I've kept some of these wines back to celebrate the 150th anniversary with my wife this weekend. So I thought I'd crack them open, zap them with a bit of nitrous for the weekend, and then they'll be nice and fresh. But these are wines I've been thinking of trying for ages, but couldn't quite slot them into a show per se. I'll just go through them. The Wine Society, yes, look it up. The Wine Society sent me a few bottles of wine to try for spring, and they've sent me a wine from a phenomenal producer in a phenomenal place. You just have to look back at my Greek shows to know how much I love the wines of Ascertico on the island of Santorini. Very fast becoming the most prestigious white wine in the whole of the Mediterranean basin. And this has been a wine that's been offered to the Wine Society at what apparently is a laughable price from Columbar, who's one of the super premium producers, 50-year-old vines. Their wines kind of start at £35 to £45. This wine is nowhere near that. So I'm very excited to try that. Have you noticed I've pulled corks? But except with this exception, I haven't tried them yet. So you get the full reaction. The full entertainment package, shall we call it? Okay, so without further ado, I should tell you what the rest of the wines are. So the next two wines, thank you very much to the guys at Cube. Cube Communications is a company that I helped found some years ago, over 20 years ago now, and they look after the PR for Bordeaux, an area that you know is very close to my heart. And if you remember episode 1 to 50, they were wines from Bordeaux, wines from Provence, wines from Tesco's, all Cube clients, because they were the only people that were invested in sending me samples for free so I could run the show. So thanks very much, you guys, for making this all happen originally. And thank you particularly to James Gabani, who helped me, who even got a theme tune that you hear at the beginning commissioned for me. Got my first tripod, microphone, etc. So thank you very much. We're 2 years on, and this is actually starting to become something. I feel it's starting to gain some sort of traction. I don't have as many subscribers as I thought I'd hoped, but then again, I do cancel 2 for every one that I get, because they're usually junk ones, and I do very carefully filter through all the junk subscribers and block them. So it's like 1 in 3, isn't it, really? Anyway, nearly 1,000 subscribers now on the show, which I think is kind of a good number. And it certainly feels like a lot more than that are actually watching it. So maybe people are watching it together, maybe it's syndicated through other things. I don't know. Enough about me. That is Vinesack, Drinks Coach UK, all lowercase Vinesack. There you go, there's the poltergeist of wind there. I don't know if you just saw that door move, but that wasn't me. The Drinks Coach UK. We have an almost straight picture behind me. I mean, it's just slightly. Oh, look at that door go! Oh, it's fantastic. Okay, I'm loving this. It's nice and fresh in here, though. I'll give you that much. We've got these two wines which came from Cube Communications, thank you, which are Bordeaux white wines of interest, of great interest. Also, the guys at Davys wine shops, Davys wine bars, Davys wine merchants have been very, very supportive over the last 2 years. This is a wine which is a part of a series of wines from this estate and also from South Africa that they sent me, and this is the poshest one. I wanted to drink this or taste this with you on camera because the others were so good. I can only imagine, how good this one's going to be. Then a wine which I started drinking with my lovely wife this week, and then we thought, hang on a minute, we have a few tins of foie gras that were given to us as gifts from her sadly departed godfather. Let's have some foie gras with this wine, which is Jurançon, which is from Gascony, and is really the wine to have with foie gras. And if not that, what? Well, then the one that everyone talks about, of course, is Sauterne or Sauterne Barsac, and I was very thrilled to see that Cube also sent me this, obviously from the Bordeaux client, which is Berry Brothers and Rudd, oldest wine merchant in the world, probably best wine merchant in the world. This is their own label, Sauterne, made by Chateau Clémence, which is the best producer in the whole of Barsac. Now, Sauterne and Barsac are two regions plugged together, which have very distinctly different feels when you actually get used to trying them over years and years and years. But they're effectively made the same way, in a very similar way. And qualitatively, I think it's only fair to say they're about the same. The most famous dessert wine in the world, you might have seen any of my tweets from a couple of weeks ago, is Chateau de Chem, and I actually hosted a Chateau de Chem dinner, and we tasted 4 different vintages of Chateau de Chem, including the most recent one, 2019. This is a wine that people drink 50, 60, 70, 80 years old, and can be absolutely mind-bending, but the whole point was to show that even the 2019 that's just been released, although it cost a few bob, is utterly delicious and is food-friendly, it's balanced, and it's just a glass of sunshine. So it's very exciting for me, having got the taste of Yquem in my mouth, that we have Chateau Clémence, which is, by and large, it's representative in Barsac. For many, even a better wine than Yquem, for many. But it's really in that top echelon, the inner tabernacle of great dessert wines in Bordeaux. You've got Yquem, you've got Clémence, you've got Sudireau, you've got Russec, you've got Coutet, you've got Guiraud. You start with Fargue, and you start running out of names after that. La Tour Blanche. Anyway, Gillette. So, finally, I just thought it'd be not quite nice to finish on something with bubbles in it. This was also sent to me by the Wine Society. Again, look them up. It's the best way to buy exceptional value for money wines, truthfully bought, with no agenda, significantly lower in price than any retailer in Britain, because they don't charge profit. It's a real club. You just have to pay to be a member. So, here we are. Once, that is. So, here we are. Clearout de Die. Clearout de Die, or Crémant de Die in this particular case, which is a bit fancier than Clairette de Die, is a sparkling wine from the Rhone Valley. And I believe the whole of Die, D-I-E that is organic. I believe it is. I remember reading that many years ago. And then I went to take pictures of it, and it's a big horseshoe of vineyards, all organic, all beautifully trained and trellised, growing Clairette, a fascinating variety, which is the majority of the wine in here. There's some aligote, but there's also muscat to give it a real grapey fruit flavour. And in the middle, slap in the middle, is one of the world's largest nuclear power stations. But that's France, okay? It's all yin and yang, town and gown, rich and poor, extreme right, extreme left. France is full of tension. That's what makes it special. Okay, right, so without further ado, we're already 10 minutes in. Let's crack on with drinking some of these wines. I've got normal tasting glasses today. Washed, mother-in-law, I hope you noticed. So, let's start with this. So, Caramolagos, one of the great producers. This is a wine which belongs to the range at the Wine Society called the Exhibition Range. There we go. Santorini Ascertico, the Exhibition Range. Santorini, a hugely overcrowded, a very expensive honeymoon destination, I think is the way you could describe it. Another way to describe it is an incredible ancient part of an old archipelago which has extraordinary soils. It's a volcano, so the soils are very, very volcanic, and wines bleed that energy and that fire and that energy and that tension. As I've said many times, the wines from Mount Etna, the wines from Napoli, the wines outside Naples, have Vesuvius ash in them. They have this energy in the wines, which is really rather special. So let's try this. 2020, lovely colour. I mean, 2020, right? So it's been, they didn't release it until now. It's got a lovely, I don't know how to describe that. It's a straw patina, maybe. But it's certainly, if I looked at that, a wine where I'm going, hey, that wasn't made yesterday. But then again, it still looks fresh and vibrant. Hola mama, mana, mana. Smells just so nice. I don't know what it is about Ascertico that I like so much, but I remember the first time I tried it. And it was a wine that I used to sell at Waitrose when I was a buyer from Butari, and it was $4.99 a bottle. Prices go up. And it was a Santorini Ascertico. And I wish that door was... I'm sorry, I can't stop that moving, so you're just going to have to put up with it. The wine has this, it's a cross between a Phew, the gun flint, and the smell of flints being smashed together that you get in Phew, and really, really great French Sauvignon Blanc. But there's something a bit more ample than that. Also, above the gunflint, when you drink a Phew, it has a silkiness. If you drink a Cellar, it has a linearity, a kind of a limestone fruitiness, but it has a kind of it follows lines. It's kind of almost like it's been etch-a-sketched. I don't know if that makes any sense. But the wines from Santorini have all of the above, but then have this monumental drag of minerals in the mouth that sort of tails to the end. You have one mouthful, you can eat 4 or 5 prawns, and the last thing you taste, once you've eaten the last prawn, is that wine coming back. They're phenomenally long, and they have wonderful flavours and textures. Going to enjoy drinking that. I need to get some seafood, I think. Or I might just pass out on the sofa with some crab sticks. Anyway, a very nice start. So, this producer normally bangs its wines out well above £30, and they're the wines you now buy in restaurants in London, Michelin-starred restaurants in London, because it's one of the very best, for pushing £100 in some cases. Let's be generous and say that they're £70 on a list, like say Chez Bruce, somewhere who doesn't overcharge for their wines. Well, this one is even on offer at the moment, and I think it's 13. That's right, 13.95 from the Wine Society. I don't imagine that'll last long, but you want to buy some now. This wine's got a good 3 or 4 years of wonderful development in it. It'll keep its acidity, its tension, its energy. If you buy it now, you'll be drinking beautifully with all seafood and shellfish you can imagine right up until September. So stock up while you can. So moving on, Chateau De Serras. This is a very special place. A shout out to 2 people that sent me an invitation to be in Wine Paris today. Big wine show in Paris. First big exhibition, certainly French exhibition, since the beginning of lockdown. And it's Claire and Xavier Perromin who run this estate. And Father Jean-Pierre Perromin was my professor at university in Bordeaux when I was there doing a postgraduate winemaking degree, or diploma, should I say, not degree. And Chateau De Serras, going to the conversation we briefly had further up here, is in the south of Bordeaux. So you've got Bordeaux here, you've got sort of like lots of famous chateaux up here, then you go out that way towards the Dordogne, where all the English people live. It's kind of like Hampshire with French accent. And you've got, on the way, Pomerol and Saint-Emilion, very famous places. Then the river goes down, which is called the Garonne. The river goes that way, it's the Dordogne, and then this river that goes down swings away and turns into another river called the Lot, so it's the Lot et Garonne, okay? But when you go from the middle of Bordeaux, where the big quays are, it's a wonderfully big support. If you go straight down, just south about an hour, let's call it an hour, it's not more than, certainly not, even in Russia I think you do an hour and 15 minutes, and it's a fairly main arterial route down to Toulouse and everywhere else, is the area of Sauternes and Barsac. And in between Sauternes and Barsac, or at least on the riverbank where Sauternes and Barsac meet, just around an area called Prégnac, is a tiny appellation all of its own. Serras. It's called Serras. So this is Chateau de Serras of Serras. I'm not entirely even sure if there are any other wines in Serras. And I've always promised to tell Claire to go and visit Claire for old time's sake. Maybe her grandpa, I don't know. There you go. So Serras makes a beautiful red wine, very accessible Grave-like wine. They have gravel soils, which makes some of the most accessible and beautiful and hugely underpriced fine red wines of Bordeaux. When I say hugely underpriced, Okay, 21 quid. I think go to Lee and Sanderman in London if you've got them as a local merchant. You can buy it online. One of the best wine merchants in the country, and they sell all of Claire's wines. I'm pretty sure, including half bottles of their dessert wine, which is what Serras as an appellation is famous for. But this is Grave appellation, which implies quite clearly that it's on an area which has been designated as an area of gravel, which allows big drainage, concentration in the wine, but also allows for wines which are very open, slightly less gnarly and cantankerous and uppity when they're young, right? So here's a wine that is made from the white grapes. Most of these super botrytis, noble rotted dessert wines, which we're going to go on to, are made from Semillon, because Semillon is a grape variety. It's got very thin skins, so it's much more susceptible to rot, easily susceptible to rot than Sauvignon Blanc. Also, the concentration, the flavours that it creates when infected by Botrytis cinerea, noble rot, are very attractive and apricoty. Sauvignon, of course, can attract it too, but Sauvignon has much more of its own individual character. I think if you make a dessert wine, which is almost 100% Sauvignon Blanc, it still tastes like Sauvignon. It doesn't taste like Serras or Barsac or Sauternes. So I think there's a lot of reasons why Semillon are used. Semillon is rounder, more harmonised. Of course, Sauvignon can be added. Muscadel can be added. There are these other varieties that are legit. Sauvignon Gris. This is a white wine from Grave. Grave is an appellation trade that allows red and white, and I can't recommend highly enough Chateau De Serras red or white. This is about 18 to 20 quid. The red wine's £1 or two more, so it's around a purple note. And these wines are easily as good as, let's say, a second wine from Medoc, from a Cru Classé Bordeaux, at around 40, I would say. So much rather drink these wines. The Southern Bordeaux reds are hugely underrated, don't get enough cred or even exposure. So here we go with a lovely glass of this. What's it made from? 60% Semillon, I think, normally. This is the ideal blend for Claire, I think. And then half and half Sauvignon Gris, Sauvignon Blanc, something like that. There might even be something else in there, I don't know. But it's usually about 60% Semillon. Obviously, they've got a lot of Semillon planted because they're a dessert wine producer. So this really does, and there have been examples of this in the past that have sort of made the step up in quality. This really does knock on the door of a handful of really well-known white wine producers in Grave. So we go from Bordeaux going south. You go to Talos, which is the university which we went to, which is near Chateau Haut-Brion, which is there, right there. And then you go south into a region called Pessac-Léognan, which, for sake of argument, let's call Grave Grand Cru. At the top, you've got things like Haut-Bailly and other utterly delicious wines. Incidentally, Claire worked for Veronique Sanders at Haut-Bailly for 15 years, and Haut-Bailly is one of the best wines in Bordeaux at any price. It's just incredible wine, and for me, the best wine in the appellation. So she must have learned something from her, and also the fact that she was allowed to work there for that long means that she must be pretty good at what she's doing. So again, another feather in the cap of Chateau Serras is it's Haut-Bailly trained. Going south, there's a handful of really famous white wines. There are producers that are probably more famous for whites than reds. I would say Domaine Chevalier. I would say Chateau Olivier. I would say Carbonieux. I would say Pape Clément. But these also make supreme red wines as well. Haut-Brion makes a white. La Mission Haut-Brion makes a white. They're at price of hundreds and hundreds of pounds. Chateau Fuzelle would be one of the late comers to this party of the wine. My parents had a pub in the New Forest, so we sold this as a house wine at £1.50 a glass. It's now a £45-55 wine, and this wine's half that. And I think that Claire and Xavier are transitioning into making white wines with such deliciousness and supreme beauty that they deserve to be talked about in the same breath. The other one, I think, which is really underrated, is Chantegrive, another one called Pic Caillou. So look out for those names. Anyway. One thing about Semillon. Sauvignon is like, it's like a blade. It's like a samurai sword. Semillon is broad. It's kind of Sauvignon's a brick that's that way, and Sauvignon's broad like that. It's almost like trying to put a pencil in your mouth, not that way, but that way. It kind of it spills across the palate. It doesn't have that sharpness that Riesling and Sauvignon has. It has this wonderful plat. I don't know really what word for it is, but it feels like the kind of like a marble tabletop. It's on which you can still taste the Sauvignon and everything else dotted about in it. The minerality is so tight that it almost tastes tannic, but it's chalky concentration. This wine follows 2018 and 19, which were difficult white wine vintages because it was so hot. And I think it's the first year where temperatures were a little lower, where they produced wines which is more typical of what you expect in Grave. 2017, by the way, was an absolute stunner. So if you've got a chance to buy anything, particularly wines from Chateau Serras from 2017, the white wine is an absolute banger. Spent far too much time talking about the first two wines. Let's move on. Okay. Another white wine from Bordeaux. Thank you very much again, Cube. Pe Bonhomme Lecture. Pe Bonhomme Lecture is a shed about 500 metres due south of the Leclerc in Blaye, which is the port town in Bordeaux. If you go to Bordeaux and go up the peninsula, opposite the posh chateaux is a town called Blaye, and there's another smaller one just north of that called Segonzac. And you can take a ferry across there rather than having to go all the way down across the river and then back up again. So it's quite handy having a car ferry there. And Blaye has one or two very, very good wines. I think the best wines in Blaye are white. I think it has a very underrated white wine terroir. There's quite a lot of sandstone, if I remember, some limestone, a little bit of, I don't know if there's chalk, but it's sort of sufficient density, although there is an alluvial component, sufficient density to make white wines that have a real opportunity to age. Maybe not as long as the wines in Grave, which you can keep for 20 or 30 years, but I think certainly wines which develop and get more interesting for 10. This wine also has a few other weird feathers in its cap. It's from the Famille Hubert. They have 2 estates. They're very, very forward-thinking. Also very, very, very into making the world well again. So this wine is Demeter classified as a biodynamic wine. I did a Vida show, I think, a couple of weeks ago. It might have been last week, where I talk about biodynamism and what it is. So please look that up so it saves us time. But it's the show before this or the one before that. But biodynamism is this incredible philosophy by a guy called Rudolf Steiner, who back in East Grinstead, back in the 20s, came up with this idea that you can regenerate and re-energise soils which have died from pesticide abuse and that sort of thing by a certain process of rebuilding of life energy. It requires you packing cow horns with horse shit and burying them in the ground, adding these weird kind of macrobiotic tinctures, and then adding to the soil. If you don't believe it, the evidence shows the contrary, and it shows it works. Nobody really knows why or how it works, but biodynamism on a piece of land that could have just been almost concrete because of the amount of abuse and pesticides it's had, after about 5 or 6 years, the roots are 3 to 5 times longer. The soil is regenerating with new worms and insects and so forth, where before it couldn't support life at all. So biodynamism is wonderful, certainly in regions which have been famous for production and intensive farming and horticulture. Bordeaux, right? So here we've got a wine which has to follow philosophies, not just in order to make sure that the soil is healthy and making sure that there's no pesticides used and so forth and nasty chemicals, but also the philosophy goes much deeper than that. When you blend the wine, when you pick it, when you even drink it. I don't know what today is. If it's a root day, this wine apparently won't taste as good as if it's a fruit day. There's a lot of ways to look at biodynamism. It reaches into everything that the person involved does on a day-to-day basis. This wine, it's a different blend. This is normally 50-50 Sauvignon Blanc Semillon. I think this is 45-45 Semillon. There's a little bit of a wine that is very underrated, I think, and that's Columbar. Columbar is, I think, capable of making much better wine than people think, and dry whites in Bordeaux, I think, are allowed up to 20 or 30% of Columbar, depending on which appellation you're in. Some actually refuse it. You can't use it, for example, in a Pessac-Léognan, I don't think. But there we go. Here we have a wine which is very ripe, I believe. It's 13.5% alcohol, compared to the 12.5% this was. Price-wise, we're talking 19 £19.95 here. I found a website earlier today that's selling this for about £22. So similar money. Went to a lot more effort though, and it's a very small estate. I think it's 3 hectares, which is 7 acres roughly. Very small, but they make 3 or 4 wines out of this, or even more, I think. The colour, quite similar to the other one actually. It's got some straw richness to it. It's very, very different. I wonder why Cube sent me these wines. I think it's because what are the nature of what they're doing to communicate for wines of Bordeaux? What are the mission statements? Is to show how diverse Bordeaux really is, and to also remind people that not that long ago there was more white wine made in Bordeaux than red. I think it's now like 80% red, but certainly when I was in university in Bordeaux in 1991, it was like more like 50-50. And there are a whole range of different white wines being made in Bordeaux now, which just never really get talked about. And at this price, they're making world-class wine. There's no doubt about that. Right, so I know this is biodynamically produced, for want of a better word. The wine will have just started fermenting naturally using wild yeasts in the air. They don't inoculate it with yeast to start the fermentation going. This is all allowed to happen perfectly naturally, as if a bunch of grapes in a bucket somewhere. I can smell quite a spicy, I wouldn't say unferal smell. It's slightly funky, but funky in a way that Semillon can smell funky. It smells kind of beeswaxy. One thing you must remember, that if you allow wine to ferment and start to ferment itself, what we call spontaneous wild ferment, there are literally hundreds of thousands of different yeasts in the air. Some will make the sugar into aldehyde, some will sugar into a little bit of vinegar maybe. Some of the yeast will turn it into pure alcohol, which you hope happens in most of the case, which is Saccharomyces cerevisiae. But this wine, because it's been fermented with many strains of yeast, rather than just electing one yeast strain to ferment it, has this texture, this pillow, this richness of textures you can only get because of the layering of thousands of different reactions all happening at the same time, rather than simply one. I use this analogy a lot, but it's better to have the 3 tenors, isn't it, than just Jose Carreras on his own. It might be pure, it might express a very specific characteristic in the music, but if you've got 3 people singing, you get 3 different versions of the same. It adds interest, it adds orchestration, it adds richness and grandness to the whole process. Same with wine. So the more yeast you use, the more interest there is, I think. You can taste this has been in some wood. It doesn't taste like there's any new wood at all. It's got a wonderful, wonderful tang of acidity and freshness on the finish. It's round, it's toothsome. The tannin is not aggressive, it's just there. This would be wonderful with some one of the local things there. In fact, is there is in fact a caviar farm in the estuary of the Gironde where you can tell when they've produced some caviar because then sturgeon's on the menu everywhere. But this would go very well with something like that, with large river fish. Be absolutely delicious. Smoked eel, trout. I think that'd be a really lovely match. Or zander, pike perch, which is in virtually every stream in France now, but a very, very tasty fish indeed. So lovely white wine, very gastronomic. This is 2020. I would love to have seen this wine 3 or 4 years older, but absolutely cracking. Okay, so there we go. Santorini in Greece, Bordeaux. What have we got to next? Right, we're in Davys Wine Merchants, and we're at Rue de Krantz de Clubhouse. Club? Does that clip mean fish? I mean, Kingclip means kingfish, doesn't it? But the Clip House, the Bostek Stein. No, the Bostek Stein, I think Stein is the old name at the bottom there. For this. Oh, where are we? Doesn't say. It is the old name for... There, Chenin Blanc. Stein is the name that Chenin Blanc used to be called for many years, for hundreds of years, and kind of established itself as the working white wine grape variety in South Africa for literally centuries. There's been this program going on for some decade, about a decade now, I'd say. Well, maybe not quite as long as that. Maybe it's coming up to its 10th year. But Andre Morgenthal, I doff my cap to you, sir. They've basically been registering all the museum vineyards, all the old vines, and here we have a 2020 Sauvignon Chenin Blanc, which I think again has been aged in inert barrels. It doesn't think it's had any new wood, but most of it's been aged in normal inert vessels. It has a wonderful pale colour. But what it does say at the top is it was planted in 1977. Silver Jubilee. So that's 31 years ago. No, it's 41, 42 years ago. Yeah. 45, sorry. It's 45, isn't it? But a long time ago. 45-year-old vines are old vines. And there's a series of wines in this range that you can buy from Davys at about £20 to £25. This is the king of the crop at £29.95. So not mucking about here, and you really have to believe what I've got to say here. But it's from old bush vines in the Swartland. Swartland is the magic wine region where some very, very old vines were discovered. The soil is all deconstructed granite and other things. Beautiful soils, very, very compact. Lots of minerality. It's just fantastic. And also to see. So vivid. If you go to Ribeirk Castile or go into Swartland, the colours, the sky is bright blue, the soil is bright orange, and there's these purple mountains. It's like somebody tripped out and did an Asia album cover. Okay, so whoa, that smells amazing, even in a epoxy little glass like this. Oh man! First thing I can smell is the ozone, the flint, the minerality of the wine. Like standing, on the top of a hill at Corfe, smelling the sort of air from the sea coming in, and then underneath it is this beautiful smell of fresh apricots and fresh stone fruits, fresh apricots, slightly sour white peaches. A little bit of orange. There's a fresh smell of pure navel orange juice in the middle somewhere. Oh, man. Grand really doesn't take it. This wine has amazing presence in the mouth. When you put it when you put it in your mouth, the first thing that happens is it almost kind of implants itself in all the walls. I now know that if I sat here for another 5 minutes, I could still taste that wine. An amazing wine. I think for £29.95. I was hoping that it was going to reach for the higher stuff here, because at £29.95 I was perfectly happy to say it's good, but maybe you should go for one of the cheaper wines, because they start at a lot less than that. I think £15 or £20. But no, treat yourself. This is the one. Drink this with, I don't know, baked crab, maybe roast pork. Fantastic with a fish curry. On its own with some cheese and nuts. It's a blinding wine, banana wine. It's absolutely fantastic. So, if I'm really honest about it, stunning wine. I mean, ridiculous wine for £13 or £14, whatever it is currently. These are beautiful wines. One which is representative and one which is not. But for sheer magnitude and brilliance and impressiveness, I think the tenner here extra is worth it. Right, going on to some slightly unusual wines. We're getting on in time now. We're nearly 35 minutes. What's the story about this? Well, this is from the famous Domaine Cauapé, run by the Remonteau family, Henri Remonteau. I posted online about a dry white wine that he sent me. I think I posted on Instagram, which was just simply to die for. These wines are made from beautiful grape varieties. The grape varieties in this region, which is in the southwest of France, in Gascony, where like goose foie gras and duck foie gras famously comes from. I know they make it in Alsace and also all over the place as well, but this is a place where eating huge amounts of offal and liver and fat and drinking dessert wine is a daily occurrence. there's so much grease in the food, but there's so much acidity in the wine, so it all works out. So you've got Petit Montseng, small Montseng, Gros Montseng, large Montseng, and you've got Petit Corbu and a few other forgotten, or Les Cépages Oubliés, the grape varieties which have been forgotten. In the sweet wine, usually is made from Petit Montseng. This is 100% Petit Montseng, I believe. And the white wine I tried, the dry white wine, was something like 85% Gros Montseng. Wonderful flavours, again, of peach, nectarine, sort of like Mayer lemon, extraordinary flavours, and the wines are dense and characterful and packed. My wife, who's really not the wine snob and the wine nerd that I am, doesn't mind a nice glass of wine. I warn you. But she told me that once at a place called La Trouvaille, very, very cool bistro in London. I'm not sure it's there anymore. She was there with a former beau of hers, and they were served a Jurançon sec, and she said she'd never forget it. She said it was the first time she tasted a wine that tasted more than just wine. And it wasn't just wine, it was, wow, I would love to know more about this. Well, this is the dessert wine. Well, dessert wine's wrong, because they make wines which are increasingly sweet. How do they do that? Well, the grapes are picked when the grapes have been allowed to passeriller, which means they actually quarter and cut or slightly nip where the bunches are hanging on the vines, and so they hang a bit deeper. They have all the circulation cut off, so they're not allowing the grapes to be re-humidified, if it loses any moisture. So the grapes start to shrivel and shrivel and shrivel and shrivel and dry out. And this is what we would describe in Germany as a Spätlese wine, a late picked wine, late harvested wine, or an Auslese, which means to be picking specific bits of each bunch on each pass. So we were talking about wines like that, but there are much, much sweeter wines in the Carpe lineup. Incredibly grand wines, wines that really only reach Michelin-starred restaurants in most of the case. But knowing that you can buy a half bottle of this for about £8 in the UK, if you look around online, there are people selling it. Or we've got to comfortably feel that this wine's going to be a good chunk under 20 quid a bottle. It's not as dessert sweet as Sauterne is, which could be anything 150 to 200 grams of sugar. This is a wine which is dessert, but there's a phrase in French which is vin tendre, which means a tender wine, which is a wine you sit down, 6-7 people, glass of an aperitif, see the sun go down, and it can be a magically refreshing drink, even though there's so much sort of sweetness and this caramel richness from all the late harvest flavours. This wine is still a wine you can just drink on its own, and that's how the French often might drink it, maybe with a little nibble of some sort. It's a deep, deep smell of confit pear, hint of cooked rhubarb. It bounces around like a pinball in the mouth. Incredible acidity and tang. This variety is famous for their low pHs. Great with a fruit salad. Although I think fruit salads, people tend to eat fruit salads to try and stay healthy. Let's move on to here, because this is a Sauterne. This wine very distinctly is made in a different way, because Jurançon of this style is made without botrytis grapes. The grapes aren't allowed to rot. They're just healthy grapes that have been allowed to ripen and ripen, and then dry out, sécher. This wine is made at Chateau Clémence in 2017. Terrific, terrific vintage. Probably entirely from botrytis grapes. What price we're looking at? Well, I think Clémence is probably around the £80 or £90 a bottle mark, I think. Yeah, something like that. But if you buy the own label selection from Berry Brothers, this is a piffling £15 for a half bottle, so equivalent to £30, which is probably where Cypre de Clémence is, but it's about the same price as their second wine. But I understand it's very, very different. It is an actual collaboration and a selection of barrels specifically for Berry Brothers, not just a rebadge. I was reading online earlier today that somebody in the Decanter Wine Show gave this wine 95 points out of 100. So one wonders, well, Clémence must be somewhere between 95 and 100 then, mustn't it? But to be getting 95 out of 100, getting a gold medal for a wine that is from such prestige but costs relatively little is really something. So my wife and I are going to try a little box, a little can, a boîte of foie gras later, and we're going to try the Jurançon, and we're going to try the Sauternes. Now, I imagine this is going to be the better choice, because I'd actually even discovered over the time that drinking wines without botrytis with foie gras is very, very delicious. And actually with botrytis, it kind of changes things slightly. But we shall see. It's going to be a fun weekend anyway. 150, spring break, yeah! Wow. There's a hint of volatility. There's a lift of, I wouldn't call it vinegar, but kind of varnish, which is quite Barsac-y, actually. Remember, this isn't a Sauternes, it's a Barsac, in the appellation of Sauternes Barsac. That's just delicious. I think it's it's not 100% Sauvignon, but near as damn it, I think. Oh, will you stop it? Poltergeists, get out. Okay, so what can we start? Where are we going with this now and then? So, £13 or £14, £20, £21, £30, £17, £15, and we're on to this. Nice finisher, Cremant de Claret. If you go to Blanquette in the south, if you go to Carcassonne buy sparkling wine, it'll be called Blanquette de Limoux. Blanquette is a reference to Mozac, which is a great variety it's mostly famously made from. Claret de D is made mostly from claret, but there's a level up where they're allowed to add other varieties, or it's made with maybe slightly less pressure, I think, but they're creamier, more sophisticated. In the France, it's like you have sparkling wines in the Loire, you have Cremant de Loire, you have Cremant d'Alsace, you have Cremant de Bourgogne. We've talked about this a million times, and go back and watch some of the shows, because they're full of those sort of wines. Best value sparkling wines in the world. So, we're back in the Wine Society. Méthode traditionnelle, Cremant de D, Poulet Fils. Very cheerful label, I don't mind saying. It's a cockerel on acid, I think that's what it is. No, so Poulet Fils, but there must be a reference to the family name, which is chicken. Okay. Pale colour. Very rarely ever vintage, because these wines are best drunk relatively young. It smells delicate. It's wonderful. Aligoté, which is the other wine variety that's in here, which you wouldn't normally see in claret. It's the kind of the working grape of Burgundy. If he's not making Chardonnay, there's a bit of Aligoté kicking around. And it turns out Aligoté is a far, far more interesting grape variety than people thought back in the 60s and 70s. And Aligoté, in my head, fits in the same drawer as Claret, which is a grape variety which is low on aromatics and flavour and full on obvious appeal, but has wonderful textures, a fluffiness to it, if you will, a limpid clarity. There's a purity to it which belies its otherwise workmanlike anonymous moniker. So we've got claret in here, we've got Aligoté in here, we've also got some muscat, and muscat is that lovely grape variety which you can both eat as a grape, also make into wonderful grapey wines. Well, that's a nice note to end on. So, random load of white wines, so me and the missus can be happy this weekend. I hope you found this not too rambling. I know it feels like it's one of the most rambly episodes I've ever done. Interesting wines. I'll put the information in the YouTube bio. But again, £13.95, something like that, from The Wine Society. Chateau Serras, Lee and Sandeman, Pe Bonhomme Latour, can't remember, but go online. There was, I think a place called Q Wines, but just put in Pe Bonhomme, oh dear, the sun's come out, Pe Bonhomme Les Tours, like that. Stick that in there. 2020. Very, very interesting wine, and a wine that could handle a whole Sunday lunch. Hell, roast chicken with all the trimmings, and then the newspapers while you doze it off afterwards. This, wow. Okay, pay peanuts, get monkeys, as they say. Ain't no monkey. This is an incredible wine for £30, and it feels, tastes, and smells like a wine that's worth £30. If somebody gave me this as a gift, I'd much rather get this than a bottle of £30 champagne or a bottle of English fizz. This, to me, is a far, far better present for the wine lover. There's so much more in it. Okay, now, the Remonteau's great wines of Domaine Cauapé. Oh, there we go. Domaine Cauapé. The Bolero is the sweet one of the sweet ones. Can't recommend it high enough, especially if you like eating liver on toast. Then Berry Brothers and Rudd, 2017, from Chateau Clémence in Balsac. Just while I'm here. Yeah. Put that in there like that. Should we put that in there like that? Yeah. That's what we were drinking last week. Chateau Yquem, 1999. 400 quid, I think. 400. Okay. And this wine says in the back, this bottle left Chateau Yquem cellars in 2022. They even tell you that this wine has not been mucked about with. Oh, God, there's still a drip left. See you next time. Oh, my God. Still good.